Why do empaths consistently attract narcissists? Not just once, repeatedly, across different relationships, different cities, different decades of their lives. Jung documented a patient who'd been in 4 relationships with men she later recognized as narcissistic. She described herself as highly empathic, someone who felt others' emotions deeply, who prioritized others' needs, who believed her sensitivity was her greatest gift. Each relationship followed an identical pattern. She'd meet a man who seemed confident, charismatic, successful. She'd feel magnetically drawn to his strength. The early months were intoxicating. She felt needed, useful, finally able to express her empathic nature fully. Then the dynamic would shift. His confidence became control. His charisma became manipulation. His success became self-absorption. She'd spend years trying to heal him with her empathy, believing if she just loved him enough, he'd change. He never changed. The relationship would collapse. She'd leave feeling completely depleted. Then she'd meet another man. Different job, different background, seemed completely different from the last one. But within months, the identical dynamic would emerge. Her giving endlessly, him taking endlessly. Her believing her empathy could save him, him draining her completely. 4 times, same pattern, different men. Jung identified what she couldn't see. She wasn't attracting narcissists because of her empathic personality. She was attracting them because of her undeveloped animus, her unconscious masculine figure that she was projecting onto every man she met. And what she called empathy wasn't natural sensitivity. It was a psychological defense structure built to avoid developing her own boundaries, authority, and assertiveness. Jung wrote in his clinical notes, "What modern psychology calls the empath-narcissist dynamic is actually anima and animus projection. The empath hasn't developed their opposite sex psychological qualities, so they project these qualities onto partners. They call this projection attraction. They call relating to their projection love. And they call the inevitable collapse being victimized by a narcissist." Jung discovered something that shouldn't be possible. The empath-narcissist pattern isn't about 2 opposite personality types attracting each other. It's about one person projecting their undeveloped psychological qualities onto another, then spending years relating to their projection instead of the actual person. This is Jung's forbidden discovery about why empaths attract narcissists. Forbidden because it reveals that the problem isn't the narcissists you're attracting. The problem is the unconscious projection pattern that makes you unable to see people clearly. Today I'll show you Jung's complete explanation, what the anima and animus actually are, why empathic personality structures make you vulnerable to narcissistic dynamics, the 3 projection patterns that guarantee repetition, Jung's 4-phase integration method, and the signs that tell you whether you're healing or still trapped. If you're ready to understand why you keep attracting the same type of person, comment this: "I withdraw my projections." But first, you need to understand what Jung meant by anima and animus, because this forgotten theory explains the empath-narcissist dynamic better than anything in modern psychology. Most people think anima and animus are just your feminine side and your masculine side. That surface understanding misses what makes Jung's discovery so psychologically profound and so dangerous when misunderstood. Jung spent years during his Red Book period encountering autonomous figures that claimed to exist independently of his conscious mind. Some of these figures were clearly masculine, others were distinctly feminine. What shocked Jung was that the feminine figures, particularly one he called Salome, operated with their own intelligence, their own agendas, their own personalities that weren't under his conscious control. He later wrote that the encounter with the anima, the feminine figure in a man's psyche, was one of the most disturbing experiences of my confrontation with the unconscious. She said things I would never consciously think. She had desires that contradicted my conscious values. She was, in the truest sense, an autonomous personality living inside my psyche. Jung developed his theory from this direct experience. The anima isn't a metaphor. It's not getting in touch with your feelings. It's an autonomous psychological complex, a subpersonality with its own consciousness, formed from multiple sources and operating largely outside your awareness. For men, the anima is the unconscious feminine figure. For women, the animus is the unconscious masculine figure. These aren't about biological sex or gender identity. They're about psychological opposites. Whatever qualities your conscious personality doesn't identify with get collected into this opposite sex figure in your unconscious. The anima or animus forms through three primary sources. First, your opposite sex parent creates the template. A man's relationship with his mother becomes the foundation for his anima. A woman's relationship with her father becomes the foundation for her animus. The qualities your parent embodied, or the qualities you needed from them but didn't receive, become embedded in this internal figure. Second, your culture's conditioning about the opposite sex programs expectations, fears, and fantasies into this figure. If you're a man raised in a culture that teaches women are emotional and irrational, that programming becomes part of your anima. If you're a woman raised where men are strong and don't show emotion, that becomes part of your animus. Third, and most controversially, Jung claimed the anima and animus contain archetypal patterns from the collective unconscious, universal images of the opposite sex that exist across all cultures and time periods. The anima appears in myths as the goddess, the muse, the temptress, the wise woman. The animus appears as the hero, the king, the warrior, the sage. Jung observed that the anima and animus are not passive collections of ideas. They are active agents in your psyche with tremendous power over your emotional life, your attractions, your relationships, and your capacity for psychological wholeness. The most obvious manifestation is romantic attraction, when you feel that overwhelming pull towards someone. Love at first sight, the sense of fate, the feeling that you've known them forever. That's almost always anima or animus projection. You're not seeing the actual person, you're seeing your internal figure projected onto them. Jung noted that people fall in love with their projections, not with the person carrying the projection. But the anima and animus operate far beyond just romantic relationships. For men, the anima influences your emotional life, your creativity, your relationship to the unconscious, and your capacity for depth. When a man is cut off from his feelings, his anima is typically repressed. When a man is overwhelmed by mood swings he can't control, his anima is possessing him. For women, the animus influences your capacity for assertiveness, logical thinking, conviction, and action in the world. When a woman struggles to voice her opinions or stand in her authority, her animus is often undeveloped. When a woman becomes rigid, dogmatic, or harshly judgmental, her animus is possessing her. Jung's crucial insight was that these figures exist on a spectrum of development. You're not born with a mature, integrated anima or animus. You're born with a primitive version that must evolve through stages, if it evolves at all. Most people remain stuck at the earliest stages their entire lives, which is why their relationship patterns never change. Understanding which stage your anima or animus has reached determines whether your relationships will be driven by unconscious compulsion or conscious choice. And Jung documented that these stages develop in a specific order. You cannot skip stages, and attempting relationships before developing past the primitive stages almost guarantees repetitive disaster. Jung documented that the anima and animus evolve through 4 distinct stages of maturity. Each stage represents a different level of psychological development. Each stage produces different relationship patterns. And most people never develop beyond stage 1 or 2, which is why their relationships keep repeating the same dynamics. At the most primitive level, the anima appears as Eve, pure biological femininity, fertility, earthiness, instinctual sexuality. The animus appears as Tarzan, raw masculine physicality, strength, primal protectiveness, survival capacity. Jung described this as the anima and animus at their most basic, purely biological, purely instinctual, concerned only with reproduction and survival. At this stage, attraction is entirely physical and unconscious. You're drawn to bodies, to biological markers of fertility or strength, to pure animal magnetism. Relationships at stage 1 are characterized by intense physical chemistry with little psychological depth. You feel overwhelming attraction, but can't articulate why. Conversations are superficial. Connection is primarily sexual. When the physical attraction fades, and it always does, there's nothing underneath holding the relationship together. Jung observed that many people remain at stage 1 their entire lives, moving from one purely physical relationship to another, always wondering why the passion never lasts and never understanding they're relating to bodies, not persons. The developmental task at stage 1 is to recognize that pure physical attraction isn't love, it's biology. If you're constantly attracted to the same physical type, if your relationships are intensely sexual but emotionally shallow, if attraction disappears once you're sexually satisfied, you're operating from stage 1 anima or animus. At stage 2, the anima evolves into Helen of Troy, beauty, romance, aesthetic refinement, emotional intensity. The animus becomes Hercules, the hero, the achiever, the romantic ideal, strength combined with noble purpose. Jung described this as the anima and animus projected through the lens of romantic fantasy. The beloved becomes idealized, not as they actually are, but as your unconscious needs them to be. Relationships at stage 2 are characterized by intense idealization followed by devastating disillusionment. You meet someone who seems perfect. They embody everything you've been searching for. The early period feels magical. You're convinced this is your soulmate, your destiny, the person who completes you. Then reality intrudes. The person reveals flaws, limits, ordinariness. They're not the romantic ideal you projected. They're a regular human being. The disappointment is crushing because you weren't relating to them. You were relating to your projection. When the projection collapses, the relationship collapses with it. Jung documented that stage 2 relationships often become obsessive. The person becomes addicted to the feeling of being in love, constantly seeking the next idealized romantic experience. They cannot stay in relationships once the idealization fades because they're not capable of loving actual people, only romantic projections. The warning sign is any relationship that starts with "they're perfect." No one is perfect. If you're seeing perfection, you're seeing projection. Jung noted that the strength of your idealization predicts the severity of your eventual disillusionment. The developmental task at stage 2 is to recognize the difference between romantic fantasy and actual intimacy. You must learn to see your partner as they are, flawed, limited, human, and choose to love them anyway, not because they match your ideal, but because you value who they actually are. At stage 3, the Anima evolves into Mary, spiritual wisdom, compassion, soul depth, the capacity to see beyond surface appearances. The Animus becomes the wise man, spiritual authority, intellectual depth, the capacity for conviction and truth-seeking. Jung described this as the anima and animus moving beyond personal relationship needs toward transpersonal values. Love becomes less about what the other person gives you and more about shared meaning, shared purpose, spiritual resonance. Relationships at stage 3 are characterized by intellectual and spiritual connection. You're attracted to someone's mind, their values, their depth of character. Physical attraction exists but isn't primary. You can have profound conversations. You share similar worldviews or life purposes. There's mutual respect for each other's growth and autonomy. But stage 3 has its own trap, spiritual or intellectual idealization. Jung observed that some people project the wise man or the spiritual guide onto their partners, expecting them to be their teacher their guru, their path to enlightenment. When the partner fails to provide spiritual completion, the relationship fails. The developmental task at stage 3 is recognizing that no person, no matter how wise, how evolved, how spiritual, can be your guru or your path to meaning. They can companion you on the path, but they cannot be the path itself. At the highest level of development, the anima becomes Sophia, divine wisdom, the capacity to hold paradox, integration of all previous stages into unified consciousness. The animus becomes Hermes, the guide between worlds, the integration of strength and sensitivity, action and reflection. Jung describes stage 4 as the fully individuated anima, or animus, no longer a projection onto others, but an integrated aspect of your own psyche that enriches your inner life and allows genuine relationship with others. At this stage, you stop needing a partner to complete you because you've integrated what you were projecting. Men develop their capacity for feeling, intuition, creativity, emotional depth, all the qualities they were unconsciously seeking in women. Women develop their capacity for assertion, logic, conviction, decisive action, all the qualities they were unconsciously seeking in men. Jung was clear. Integration of the anima or animus doesn't make you androgynous, it makes you psychologically complete. A man with integrated anima is more fully masculine, grounded in strength, but capable of emotional depth. A woman with integrated animus is more fully feminine, connected to intuition, but capable of decisive action. Relationships at stage 4 are characterized by seeing your partner clearly, not as a projection, not as an ideal, not as your completion, but as another whole person you choose to relate with. There's attraction without compulsion, love without possession, intimacy without fusion. Jung observed that most people never reach stage 4 because they never do the work of integrating their anima or animus. They spend their entire lives projecting these figures onto partners, wondering why every relationship follows the same pattern. But understanding the stages isn't enough. You need to recognize the specific projection patterns that keep you trapped, patterns that operate so automatically you don't realize they're destroying every relationship you enter. Jung documented 3 specific patterns of anima and animus projection that systematically destroy relationships. If you recognize these patterns in your relationship history, you're not relating to actual people, you're relating to your projections. The first pattern operates like this. You meet someone. Immediately, you feel intense attraction. They seem to embody everything you've been searching for. You idealize them. You see them as perfect, as your soulmate, as the person who finally understands you. The early period is intoxicating. Then reality emerges. They reveal ordinary human flaws. They're not the ideal you projected. The disappointment is crushing. You feel betrayed, not because they deceived you, but because your projection collapsed. Often you swing from idealization to demonization. They go from perfect to terrible. The relationship ends badly. Jung described the mechanism. The anima or animus creates an unconscious image of the ideal partner, a composite of your parent, your cultural conditioning, and archetypal fantasies. When you meet someone who superficially matches this image, you project the entire complex onto them. You fall in love with your projection, not the person. The warning signs are unmistakable. If you're prone to love at first sight, if you frequently feel you found the one, only to be devastated months later, if your relationships follow a pattern of intense idealization, followed by bitter disappointment, you're trapped in pattern 1. Jung documented one patient's history, 7 relationships over 15 years, each following identical trajectory. Intense connection initially, feeling of destiny, conviction this person was different. Then within 6-12 months, devastating disillusionment. The patient kept blaming the partners. They changed. They deceived me. They weren't who I thought. Jung noted. The partners didn't change. Her projection collapsed. She was seeing them clearly for the first time, and because she'd related to the projection rather than the person, there was no actual relationship to sustain once the projection dissolved. The psychology is brutal. The stronger your initial idealization, the more severe your eventual devastation. You're creating the conditions for your own heartbreak by refusing to see people as they actually are from the beginning. The second pattern is even more insidious. You keep choosing the same type of person repeatedly. Different name, different face, different background, but the same core personality, the same relationship dynamic, the same eventual outcome. Jung described this as repetition compulsion driven by unintegrated anima or animus. Your unconscious is trying to resolve an old wound by recreating the original dynamic over and over, hoping for a different outcome that never comes. The mechanism works through your anima or animus, carrying an imprint of your opposite sex parent, particularly unmet needs or unresolved wounds from that relationship. Your unconscious keeps choosing partners who match that template, unconsciously hoping to heal the original wound. If your father was emotionally unavailable, your animus carries the template, men are distant but worth pursuing. You keep choosing emotionally unavailable men, unconsciously trying to make them open up, to succeed where you failed with your father. But you never succeed because you're relating to your animus projection, not the actual person. If your mother was controlling and intrusive, your anima carries the template, women are smothering but caring. You keep choosing controlling women, initially drawn to the caring aspect, then suffocated by the control. You leave, then find another woman matching the same template. Jung observed that people trapped in repetition compulsion often recognize the pattern but feel helpless to change it. They're consciously aware they're choosing the same type, but the attraction feels involuntary. Because it is involuntary, their anima or animus is driving the choice from the unconscious. The warning sign is hearing yourself say things like, "Why do I always attract narcissists?" Or, "All the men I date are emotionally unavailable." Or, "Every woman I'm attracted to is drama." You're not attracting them. You're choosing them unconsciously because they match your anima or animus template. Jung documented a case. A woman had dated 5 men over 10 years. All were charismatic, successful, and ultimately revealed to be unfaithful. She consciously swore off this type. Then met a man who seemed completely different, quiet, stable, loyal. 6 months into the relationship, she discovered he'd been cheating. Her unconscious had chosen the same type again, just in different packaging. Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Your repetition compulsion isn't fate, it's your unintegrated anima or animus running your choices." The third pattern is the most destructive. You unconsciously believe a romantic partner will complete you, heal you, make you whole. You project your unlived potential onto them and expect them to provide what you're missing internally. Jung described this as projecting your own undeveloped capacities onto the partner and then trying to access those capacities through relationship rather than developing them yourself. For men, this often manifests as projecting feeling, depth, and soul onto women. A man cut off from his emotional life meets a woman who seems deeply emotional, connected to meaning, spiritually attuned. He feels more alive around her because being with her lets him access his anima projection. But he's not developing these qualities himself. He's using her as a proxy for his own emotional development. When the relationship ends, he loses access to those qualities again. He feels empty, incomplete, like part of himself died. He searches for another woman to project onto. The pattern repeats because he never integrated his own anima. For women, this often manifests as projecting authority, conviction, and decisive action onto men. A woman disconnected from her own power meets a man who seems strong, certain, capable of taking charge. She feels safe with him because being with him lets her access her animus projection. But she's not developing her own authority. She's outsourcing it to him. When he fails to be consistently strong, or when the relationship ends, she collapses. She feels powerless, incapable of functioning alone. She searches for another strong man. The pattern repeats because she never integrated her own animus. Jung was definitive. The completion fantasy is a trap. No person can complete you. The qualities you seek in a partner are qualities you need to develop in yourself. Until you integrate your anima or animus, you'll keep seeking someone to carry these projections for you. The warning sign is any version of "I need them," or "they complete me," or "I'm not myself without them." Jung noted, if you're not yourself without them, you've never been yourself. You've been your projection. These three patterns, idealization, devastation, repetition, compulsion, and completion fantasy, are not separate issues. They're all manifestations of the same problem, unintegrated anima or animus. The solution isn't better partner selection. The solution is integration. And Jung developed a specific method for it. After decades of clinical work and his own Red Book confrontation with his anima, Jung developed a precise 4-phase method for integrating anima and animus projections. This isn't about eliminating your capacity for attraction or romantic love. It's about transforming unconscious compulsion into conscious choice. Jung taught that your type, the kind of person you're consistently attracted to, is a direct map of your anima or animus projection. The technique begins with brutal honesty about your relationship history. Make a list of everyone you've been romantically attracted to, not just who you dated, everyone who triggered strong attraction. Then identify the common qualities, not surface characteristics like blonde hair or works in finance, but deeper patterns, emotionally distant, highly charismatic, nurturing, intellectually challenging, spiritually oriented, dominant, submissive. Jung observed that people often protest they don't have a type because their partners look different. But underneath surface differences, the psychological type is almost always identical. What matters isn't whether they look similar. It's whether they activate the same feelings in you, fit the same role in the relationship, trigger the same dynamics. Once you've identified the pattern, ask the crucial question: what qualities does this type embody that I've failed to develop in myself? If you're attracted to emotionally expressive people, where have you suppressed your own emotional expression? If you're attracted to intellectual authority figures, where have you abandoned your own intellectual conviction? If you're attracted to free spirits, where have you caged your own wildness? Jung was clear. The qualities you consistently seek in partners are almost always qualities your conscious personality has rejected or never developed. Your anima or animus carries these disowned qualities, and you project them outward, then pursue people who seem to embody them. One of Jung's patients documented this process. I realized I'd only ever dated strong, decisive women. I initially thought this proved I liked confident partners. Jung helped me see I'd completely abdicated my own authority and decision-making capacity. I was outsourcing to these women what I needed to develop in myself. The recognition creates a choice. You can keep projecting and pursuing people who embody your disowned qualities, or you can begin developing these qualities yourself. Most people never reach this choice because they never recognize the projection in the first place. Once you've recognized your projection, the second phase requires engaging directly with your internal anima or animus figure through active imagination, the same technique Jung developed during his Red Book period. The practice is straightforward but psychologically demanding. Find solitude. Close your eyes. Imagine your anima or animus appearing before you. Don't try to control what form this figure takes. Let it emerge spontaneously. For men, the anima often appears as a woman embodying qualities from your type. For women, the animus often appears as a man matching your pattern. Then speak directly to this figure. Ask, who are you? What do you want from me? Why have you been choosing my partners? What are you trying to give me that I'm not receiving? Jung emphasized that you must let the figure respond in its own voice. Don't make up the answers consciously. Wait until the response arises spontaneously, often saying things you wouldn't consciously think. His own dialogue with his Anima during the Red Book period transformed his understanding. He documented one exchange where he asked his Anima why she kept appearing in his fantasies. She responded, "Because you've spent your entire life in your head, analyzing, intellectualizing, controlling. I represent everything you've rejected: emotion, irrationality, chaos, creativity. Until you integrate me, I'll keep appearing in your projections, trying to force you to acknowledge what you're missing." The dialogue continues over multiple sessions. You're not trying to eliminate your Anima or Animus. You're trying to understand what it represents, what needs it carries, what disowned aspects of yourself it's trying to restore. Jung taught one patient, "Your Animus appears as demanding, critical masculine voices telling you you're not good enough. When you dialogue with these voices, ask what standards they're trying to uphold. Often you'll discover they're trying to push you toward your own authority and excellence, but in a distorted way because you've never consciously owned that drive yourself. The goal isn't to make the figure disappear, it's to establish conscious relationship with it." Jung described this as no longer being possessed by your Anima or Animus, but instead having conscious access to it as an internal resource. The third phase is the most challenging. You must consciously withdraw your Anima or Animus projection from current or past partners and see them as they actually are, not as carriers of your unlived potential. If you're currently in a relationship, this requires asking, what qualities have I been projecting onto this person? What am I asking them to provide that I need to develop myself? Then consciously separating what they actually offer from what you've been unconsciously demanding they provide. Jung documented how difficult this is. When you withdraw projection, your partner suddenly looks different. They seem diminished because you're no longer seeing them through the magnifying lens of your projection. Many relationships end at this point, not because the partner changed, but because you're seeing clearly for the first time that the relationship was built on projection, not actual connection. But some relationships survive and deepen. If there's genuine love beneath the projection, if you value who this person actually is beyond what you were projecting onto them, the relationship can transform from unconscious need into conscious choice. One patient described the shift. "After working with Jung, I realized I'd been projecting the strong protector onto my husband. I'd never developed my own capacity to feel safe in the world. I was using him as my safety. When I withdrew the projection and saw him clearly, I realized he wasn't particularly strong or protective. He was anxious, avoidant, often needed me to be strong. Initially, I was devastated. But then I saw who he actually was, and I loved that person differently, more realistically. And I started developing my own sense of safety instead of demanding he provide it." Jung taught, withdrawal of projection doesn't end love. It transforms romantic projection into genuine relatedness. You stop needing them to complete you and start choosing to companion them as they are. If you're not currently partnered, this phase requires reviewing past relationships and consciously recognizing, I wasn't seeing them, I was seeing my projection. This isn't about blame, not blaming yourself or them. It's about clarity. You were relating to an internal figure you projected outward. They were relating to their projections. Neither of you ever truly saw the other. The liberation comes when you realize, I don't have to keep repeating this pattern. I can develop these qualities myself instead of searching for someone to embody them for me. The final phase requires actually developing the qualities you've been projecting, integrating what Jung called the contrasexual aspects of your psyche. For men, this means consciously developing the qualities carried by the Anima: emotional awareness, intuitive knowing, receptivity, creativity, connection to the unconscious, capacity for depth and soul. Jung emphasized, this doesn't make you less masculine. It makes you completely masculine, a man with access to his full psychological range. For women, this means consciously developing the qualities carried by the Animus: assertiveness, logical analysis, conviction, decisive action, intellectual authority, capacity for independence and autonomy. Jung taught, this doesn't make you less feminine. It makes you completely feminine, a woman with access to her full psychological range. The practice requires conscious behavioral change. If you've been projecting emotional depth onto partners, you must develop your own practice for accessing emotions: therapy, journaling, art, meditation. If you've been projecting intellectual authority onto partners, you must develop your own capacity for study, analysis, forming and defending your own positions. Jung documented one man's integration. He had always been drawn to artistic, emotionally expressive women. Through our work, he recognized he'd completely cut himself off from creativity and feeling. Integration required him to begin painting, terribly at first, but consistently, to journal his emotional experiences, to stop intellectualizing his feelings and actually feel them. Over 2 years, his attraction patterns shifted. He was still drawn to creative women, but no longer needed them to carry his creativity for him. He could meet them as a fellow creator. Jung described the outcome of successful integration. You develop psychological androgyny, not in the social or sexual sense, but in the psychological sense. You become a whole person, capable of accessing both masculine and feminine psychological functions, depending on what the situation requires. The sign of integration is paradoxical. You become more differentiated in your core gender identity, while simultaneously gaining access to opposite qualities. An integrated man is more fully masculine, grounded in his strength, but can also access feeling, receptivity, and depth when needed. An integrated woman is more fully feminine, rooted in her intuition, but can also access logic, assertion, and authority when required. But understanding the method isn't the same as knowing whether it works. Jung studied people who successfully integrated their anima or animus, and people who remained trapped in projection their entire lives. The difference reveals everything about whether this difficult work is worth attempting. Jung spent decades observing relationship patterns in patients, colleagues, historical figures, and himself. 2 contrasting cases reveal what determines whether someone successfully integrates their anima or animus, or remains trapped in projection and repetitive relationship failure. Jung's relationship with his wife Emma provides the clearest example of successful integration, precisely because it wasn't simple or easy, and Jung documented the transformation honestly. In his early marriage, Jung admitted he projected his anima heavily onto Emma. He saw her as the carrier of emotional depth, domestic warmth, and stability while he pursued intellectual achievement and professional recognition. Emma managed the household, raised their 5 children, and provided the emotional grounding Jung's work demanded. But during Jung's Red Book period, this dynamic became unsustainable. As Jung confronted his own anima through his descent into the unconscious, he could no longer maintain the projection that Emma was the sole carrier of feeling and soul in their relationship. The crisis nearly destroyed their marriage. Jung later wrote, I had to recognize that I'd been asking Emma to live my unlived life, to carry all the feminine qualities I'd rejected in myself. My confrontation with the unconscious forced me to integrate these qualities rather than projecting them onto her. The transformation took years. Jung began developing his own relationship to his emotional life, to intuition, to creativity. He painted, he wrote poetry, he engaged his own unconscious directly rather than experiencing it through projection onto Emma. Simultaneously, Emma began her own development, studying analytical psychology, eventually becoming an analyst herself. developing her intellectual authority and professional identity. Their relationship transformed from unconscious projection to what Jung called psychological partnership, two individuated people consciously choosing relationship rather than two incomplete people clinging to each other for completion. Jung reflected, "The integrated relationship isn't characterized by constant harmony. It's characterized by two whole people who can consciously engage conflict, disagreement, and difference because they are not desperately needing the other to complete them." Emma and I argued more after integration than before, but the arguments were real, about actual differences, not about projections. The outcome validated the work. Their marriage lasted 52 years until Emma's death, not because it was easy or perfect, but because it evolved from projection to genuine partnership. And both Jung and Emma continued developing psychologically throughout their lives rather than remaining fixed in the roles their early projections demanded. Jung documented a contrasting case, a male patient he worked with over 15 years, who never successfully integrated his anima despite understanding the theory intellectually. The patient was a successful professional, intelligent, psychologically sophisticated. He came to Jung after his third divorce, recognizing he kept choosing the same type of woman, emotionally expressive, artistic, somewhat chaotic. Each relationship followed an identical pattern: intense attraction, idealization, moving in together quickly, then gradual suffocation as her emotional intensity felt overwhelming, ending with him feeling trapped and eventually leaving. Jung helped him recognize the pattern. His anima carried all his disowned emotionality and creativity. He'd built his life on rational control and professional achievement, completely suppressing his own feeling life. He was projecting his undeveloped emotional capacity onto these women, initially fascinated by qualities he'd rejected in himself, then eventually repelled by them because they remained foreign to his conscious personality. The patient understood intellectually. He could articulate the dynamic clearly, but he never did the integration work. He never developed his own emotional capacity, never took up painting or writing or any creative practice, never actually embodied the qualities he kept projecting. Jung wrote, "He preferred analysis to change. He found it fascinating to understand why he kept choosing the same type, but understanding didn't stop him from continuing the pattern. Within a year of our discussing his anima projection, he was in a new relationship with a woman matching the exact template. Over 15 years, Jung documented the patient going through 2 more relationships following the identical pattern. Each time, the patient would return to therapy, recognize the projection, commit to integration work, then abandon it once the immediate crisis passed. Jung's conclusion was sobering. Insight without action is useless. He knew his pattern intellectually, but wouldn't do the work of actually developing the qualities he projected. Knowing why you're trapped doesn't free you. Only changing your behavior, actually integrating what you've been projecting, creates freedom." The patient's relationship history never changed. Different women, same dynamic, same outcome. He remained trapped in anima projection until Jung eventually discontinued treatment, recognizing the patient wasn't genuinely interested in changing, only in being understood. What separated Jung's successful integration from his patient's perpetual failure? Jung identified one critical factor. Jung was willing to embody change rather than just understand it intellectually. Jung didn't just analyze his anima, he painted her. He dialogued with her. He developed actual emotional capacity, actual creative practice, actual engagement with his own unconscious. The integration happened in behavior, not just insight. His patient preferred understanding to changing. He found the theory fascinating but never translated insight into action. And without behavioral change, without actually developing the projected qualities, the pattern continued indefinitely. Jung's final observation was definitive. Integrating your anima or animus isn't an intellectual exercise. It requires you to actually become more psychologically complete, to develop real capacities you've been outsourcing to partners. Most people prefer the fantasy of change to the work of changing. This is why most people never integrate their anima or animus. They'd rather understand their pattern than break it. They'd rather have sophisticated explanations for why their relationships fail than do the uncomfortable work of developing their disowned qualities. But for those willing to do the actual work, Jung documented specific signs that reveal whether integration is progressing or whether you're still trapped in projection. How do you know whether you're actually integrating your anima or animus, or whether you're just intellectually understanding projection while continuing to repeat the same patterns? Jung documented 6 specific signs that distinguish real integration from mere analysis. The most immediate sign of integration is that your rigid attraction pattern begins to shift. Jung observed that as you develop the qualities you've been projecting, you stop needing to find those qualities in a partner. Your type, the narrow range of people you're attracted to, begins to expand. Before integration, you have a very specific type. You can describe exactly what you're attracted to, and you're rarely attracted to anyone outside that template. After integration begins, you notice attraction to a wider range of people. The compulsive quality of your type loosens. One patient described the shift. "I'd only ever been attracted to quiet, intellectually intimidating men. After integrating my animus, developing my own intellectual authority, I found myself attracted to a much wider range. I could appreciate quiet, intellectual men without needing them to carry my unlived intelligence. I could also appreciate extroverted, emotional men I would never have noticed before." This doesn't mean attraction becomes random or that everyone suddenly seems appealing. It means the narrow, compulsive, "I can only be attracted to this specific type" rigidity dissolves. You develop actual choice about who you pursue rather than being driven by unconscious projection. Jung taught that the intensity of your initial idealization correlates directly with the strength of your projection. As you integrate your anima or animus, idealization naturally decreases, not because you're becoming cynical, but because you're seeing people more clearly from the beginning. Before integration, meeting someone who matches your type triggers overwhelming idealization. They seem perfect, destined, uniquely suited to you. After integration begins, you can see people's positive qualities without magnifying them into perfection. You notice both their strengths and their limitations from early in the relationship. This isn't disillusionment, it's realistic perception. You're not disappointed by their ordinariness because you're not initially projecting extraordinariness onto them. Jung noted, "The integrated person can appreciate someone without idealizing them. They see both the beauty and the flaws, both the potential and the limits, without needing the person to be more than human." If you notice you're able to be attracted to someone while simultaneously seeing their limitations clearly, without the need to either idealize or dismiss them, integration is progressing. Perhaps the most dramatic sign of integration is that your relationships become more stable and less emotionally volatile. Jung observed that projection-based relationships are characterized by intense highs and devastating lows. Integration-based relationships are characterized by steadiness. Before integration, your relationships feel like emotional roller coasters. Intense passion, dramatic conflicts, devastating breakups, reunion fantasies. The emotional intensity feels like proof of deep connection, but it's actually evidence of unstable projection. After integration, relationships feel calmer. There's attraction without obsession, conflict without crisis, disagreement without dissolution. The steadiness might initially feel boring compared to the drama you're used to, but that's because you're experiencing actual relating rather than projection dynamics. One patient described the adjustment. "My first relationship after integration work felt flat to me initially. There wasn't the overwhelming passion I was used to. I worried something was wrong. Jung helped me see that nothing was wrong. This was what healthy attraction feels like when it's not driven by desperate projection. I was actually seeing my partner clearly and choosing to be with them rather than being compulsively driven by unconscious need. If your current relationship feels more stable but less dramatically intense than previous relationships, this is likely a sign of decreasing projection, not decreasing love. The most concrete sign of integration is behavioral. You actually develop the qualities you used to seek exclusively in partners. Jung was definitive. Integration without behavioral change is fantasy. Real integration appears in what you actually do, not just what you understand. For men integrating the anima, this means developing actual emotional literacy, being able to identify and express feelings, accessing intuition, engaging creative practices, developing relationship to your inner life. Not just thinking about these qualities, but embodying them. For women integrating the animus, this means developing actual assertiveness, stating your needs clearly, making decisions confidently, standing in your intellectual authority, taking decisive action in the world. Not just admiring these qualities in men, but embodying them yourself. Jung documented one woman's integration. She had always been attracted to dominant, decisive men because she'd never developed her own authority. Integration required her to actually practice making decisions, starting with small ones, gradually building to major life choices, to voice her opinions in meetings even when anxious, to pursue leadership roles even when uncomfortable. After 2 years, she reported, "I still appreciate decisive men, but I don't need them anymore. I've become decisive myself." If you're actually doing things, creative practices, assertiveness training, emotional processing work, intellectual development, that embody your projected qualities, integration is real. If you're only thinking about it, integration hasn't begun. Jung observed that as your anima or animus integrates, your memory of past relationships shifts. You begin to see clearly what was projection and what was real. This brings both grief and liberation. Before integration, you remember past relationships through the lens of your projections. The person either remains idealized in memory, "They were perfect, I lost the one," or demonized, "They were terrible, I was victimized." Both distortions prevent you from seeing what actually happened. After integration begins, you can look back at past relationships with clear eyes. You see both what you projected onto them and who they actually were. You recognize your role in the dynamic, not with shame, but with understanding. You can acknowledge, "I wasn't seeing them clearly, and they probably weren't seeing me clearly either." One patient described this shift, "I spent 5 years after my divorce convinced my ex-husband was a narcissist who destroyed me. After Animus integration work, I could see clearly. He wasn't a narcissist. He was just an ordinary man with ordinary flaws. I'd projected my undeveloped masculine authority onto him, needed him to be strong and decisive for both of us, then hated him when he inevitably disappointed me. We were both trapped in unconscious projection dynamics. Understanding this didn't make me want him back, but it freed me from the bitterness." If you can think about past relationships without strong emotional charge, neither yearning nor resentment, just clear-eyed recognition of what the dynamic actually was, integration is progressing. The final and perhaps most important sign of integration is that you can be alone without feeling incomplete. Jung taught that the person with integrated anima or animus doesn't need a relationship to feel whole. They may want partnership, may choose relationship, but they don't need it for psychological completion. Before integration, being single feels intolerable. You're constantly seeking the next relationship, unable to be comfortable with yourself, feeling like something essential is missing. This desperation drives you into unconscious choices, partnering with anyone who matches your projection template rather than consciously choosing compatible people. After integration, being alone feels complete. You're not opposed to relationship, but you're not desperately seeking it either. You can be content with yourself because you've developed the qualities you are outsourcing to partners. Jung reflected on his own experience. After integrating my anima, I could be alone for extended periods during my Bollingen retreats without feeling I was missing something essential. I'd developed access to my own emotional depth, my own creativity, my own relationship to the unconscious. I could still value relationship with Emma, but I didn't need her to access these aspects of myself. If you notice, you can be happily single for extended periods, not avoiding relationship out of fear, but genuinely content with your own company. Your anima or animus is integrating. You've become the complete person you were seeking in a partner. These 6 signs don't appear all at once. Integration is a gradual process taking years, not months. But if you're experiencing even 1 or 2 of these signs, the work is progressing. And if you're experiencing none of them, despite working on yourself, you're likely engaging in analysis without actual integration. Your anima or animus has been choosing your romantic partners your entire life. Every person you've been irresistibly drawn to, every relationship that felt like fate, every pattern you've repeated despite knowing better. All of it driven by this unconscious opposite-sex figure projecting itself onto the people around you. You're not broken because you keep attracting the same type. You're human. Everyone has an anima or animus. The difference between people trapped in repetitive relationship disasters and people capable of conscious, mature love isn't that the latter eliminated their anima or animus. It's that they integrated it. You're not naive for believing this time will be different when you meet someone matching your type. Your anima or animus is ancient, powerful, and deeply embedded in your psyche. It will keep projecting until you do the conscious work of integration. The question isn't whether you have projections. Everyone does. The question is whether you'll recognize them, withdraw them, and develop the qualities you've been outsourcing to partners, or whether you'll spend your life relating to projections instead of people. Jung's integration method offers a path from unconscious compulsion to conscious choice, from needing someone to complete you to choosing someone to companion, from projecting your unlived potential to embodying it yourself, from repetitive relationship failure to mature, conscious love. But this work isn't easy. It requires you to develop qualities your entire personality has been structured to avoid. If you're a man who's built his identity on rational control, integrating your anima means developing emotional capacity that feels foreign and uncomfortable. If you're a woman who's built her identity on accommodation and nurturing, integrating your animus means developing assertiveness that feels aggressive and wrong. Most people prefer the fantasy of understanding their pattern to the work of changing it. They'd rather have sophisticated explanations for why their relationships fail than develop the qualities that would make different relationships possible. For those willing to do the actual work, those willing to not just understand projection but withdraw it, not just recognize their type but develop what they've been projecting, not just want change but embody it, Jung's method works. Comment below which projection pattern you recognize most in your relationship history. Pattern 1 for idealization, then devastation, pattern 2 for repetition compulsion, or pattern 3 for the completion fantasy. Let's build a community of people doing conscious integration work instead of unconscious projection. If this exploration of why you keep choosing the same person transformed your understanding, hit that like button. You've joined the rare few who understand that your relationship patterns aren't accidents or fate. They're your unconscious anima or animus running your choices. Subscribe for more deep dives into Jung's most transformative insights, the psychology that doesn't just explain your patterns, but gives you the method to actually change them. And if you haven't watched my previous videos on Jung's Red Book period and his shadow integration method, watch those next. The Red Book shows where Jung discovered the anima and animus during his descent into the unconscious. The shadow integration video shows how to integrate your personal darkness before attempting anima-animus work. Together, these 3 videos give you Jung's complete method for becoming psychologically whole. Your anima or animus will keep projecting until you integrate it. Jung proved it's possible to bring unconscious relationship patterns into consciousness. The question is, are you ready to see who you've actually been choosing and why? Thank you for watching. See you in the next dimension.